All for being here on this lovely summertime day. Here in a minute, we'll get Director of Athletics Ross Bjork up here. He's going to open up with a number of comments first, and then when he's through, we'll open it up for questions. It's 12:59, and I think, Ross, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would rather be at football camp right now? Anybody? What's that? Oh, you came in for the AC? Yes. Yeah. Can I slide this a little bit? All right. Yeah, I know. Look, this is this may be boring to some, but clearly there's some interest here. So we'll go ahead and lay out. We'll talk a little bit about state of college athletics, but also some Ohio State news as well. So just kind of bear with me a little bit as we kind of open this up. So I just got back from our annual NACTA Athletic Director Convention. All the administrators, 6,800 or so athletic administrators gathered in Orlando. You know, fortunate to be the NACTA president for this past year. So that duty ended yesterday, passed the gavel off to the next president. But, you know, it really provided a lot of, I think, really affirmation about what we do. There's a lot of positive optimism, even though there is some uncertainty that we're still navigating. But, you know, I think we kind of tried to bookend everything with, we're still going to go to class and we're going to play the games. And everything in the middle of that is going to be different, has been different. That's okay. We're all adapting. But if you think about those two fundamentals, academics and games, and then everything in between, I think that kind of lays everything out. So I've got a few things to do, but first want to acknowledge Janine Oman. She could not be here today on her retirement. She's been here, I won't say how many years, a long time. And she's just been so thoughtful, so graceful, just a tremendous leader, tremendous respect. And so we want to acknowledge Janine on her retirement. I told her when she approached me, I said, you can't leave yet though. I need at least one more year to transition all of this. And then I know you all want to celebrate this man right here, Jerry Emig, on his retirement. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure you'll come up with all kinds of ideas on how to roast Jerry or get him back over time. So I think this worked out perfect to be able to announce this time of year. Now Jerry can do his job, go to work. All of you can, again, figure out a way to roast him, toast him, whatever you want to do throughout the year. So you might want to be on your toes throughout the year. There might be some tricks coming your way. But really, Jerry, he's a legend in our industry. You know, is walking around the convention, different colleagues in my past that I've worked with. Everybody asks about Jerry. How's Jerry doing? How's he doing? You know, he's a legend. He does a great job. So we want to just thank Jerry for all you've done for the Buckeyes. So congratulations on the retirement. So I'm coming up on 1 year on the job, July 1st of last year. You guys all know we had the transition with Gene, and that was a great gift to be able to overlap. You know, this is just a great place. We know what the standard is, we know the expectation, but it's been really awesome just to meet so many people on the journey here. You know, I still feel like I'm calibrating myself a little bit. One, you want to do all the new guy stuff. Two, Ohio State is a big place. It's massive, and we have so many sports and athletes. And then we have all the changes. So between those three buckets, I think I'm still getting used to, you know, what's the rhythm? You know, how do I communicate? You know, how do we continue to, you know, soak ourselves in to all of this? It's been a really, really great pleasure to work with our board of trustees. We have a new athletic committee that's been really, really powerful to be able to engage on a really, really frequent basis with our board. And so I want to thank them. President Carter has been amazing, steady hand, lots happening in higher ed, right? And so to be able to have a steady hand, to be able to have somebody who understands athletics, but also can deal with the magnitude of Ohio State, I think has been tremendous. And so it's been great to work with our board and President Carter. I want to thank our staff. Our staff, I mean, this has been hard. We've had to be creative. We've had to adapt. We've had to do some really difficult things that people that got in the business, Jerry, when he got in the business, or whoever it might have been, oh my God, I can't believe we're dealing with this. But no one said, I can't do this. No one said, hey, we're not going to try to do this. So I really want to thank our staff for all of their creativity and adaptability. We work a lot with our legal counsel office, our Office of Legal Affairs, and I want to thank them and Garcia. Tremendous strategy, navigating all of this. So great partnerships across campus. Really the way I think about this, what we've done is hard, but it's doable hard. There's a way to do this, and I think we're outlining this the right way. So look, what I got here, I think the mantra is leave it better than you found it, period. What does that look like? There's a lot to that. That's a high bar, but leave it better than you found it. I think our anchors are best-in-class student-athlete experience and leaders in college athletics. People look to Ohio State. And then from there, you start to roll out, okay, how do we continue to be best in class? We have the circle of care that's right out here on the wall. That's a best-in-class model. How do we capitalize? You guys have heard me say this. We're a public trust of the state of Ohio. Everybody owns it, right? Here in the state of Ohio, everybody wants a piece of the Buckeyes. And so how do we nurture that? But how do we grow upon that? How do we really capitalize on it? And so I think in a lot of ways, I believe that there's still potential. And that's kind of hard to do when you think about the brand of Ohio State, but there are so many elements that we can tap into. So how do we honor that tradition, but also be creative, be innovative? Commercialize is a word now, right? But how do we get more donors involved? How do we get more fans buying merchandise? So we're plugging into all those different elements, and we're going to make sure we capitalize on this. And then, of course, what's the right model for Ohio State? How do we be bold? How do we use our voice effectively? People, they look around the room and they want Ohio State to have an opinion, and that's okay. We take that with great responsibility. So there's a lot of things that we've been doing to try to, reflect on vision, but leave it better than we found it. Leader in college athletics, and then best-in-class student-athlete experience. A lot of cool things have happened. This is our best academic year ever, period. Best academic year ever, 3.4 cumulative grade point average. We have a 97% placement rate of our student-athletes this past year. So either they got a job, they're turning pro, or they're going on to some graduate school or some post higher education degree. So you think about that placement rate, 97%. We're still working. The 3% have something in the works, and so I think it'll be close to 100% here pretty soon. 506 academic all Big Ten selections. 36 of our 36 varsity teams had a cumulative GPA for this spring semester. And then 7 programs had a perfect APR score, including national championship football team. The only Division I program that had a perfect APR score, and of course, we won that national championship. We hosted 24 NCAA or conference postseason events, 59 All-Americans, 4 team national championships, 8 team conference champions, and then lots of other individual statistics. We're 4th in the Directors' Cup. As we sit here today, we still have baseball and track, so maybe we'll toggle a little bit, but right now we sit here in 4th place after the spring sports that have been reported. And then if you think about what we do in the community, we hosted 3 major events last year in the shoe outside of football. We had a lot of football events, but we hosted 3 major events, right? Our Buckeye Country Superfest, music festival for a couple days. We had international soccer, and then we had the stadium series. So 3 massive events. And if you look at all of the events that we had, I want to make sure I get these numbers right. We had 311 events in our venues, from Nationwide Arena to Mershon to Schottenstein Center to the Shoe to all the things that we do. And that's a massive imprint on our campus. We had 1,900 events in our athletic facilities, from conferences to games, whatever it might have been. We've sold a record collegiate athletic sponsorship level of $40 million in sponsorship revenue. We're the only program that has that threshold. We had the best fundraising year ever, $80 million. And we have a total economic impact of all the things. If you add all the stuff up between games and concerts and events, over $800 million of economic impact. So really, really fascinating. We've worked on a lot of things. Structure of our department, we announced some things today. New revenue, expense calibration, We're the first athletic program to have a $300 million operating budget. That's not just a one-time event. That's an operating budget. We hired 4 new coaches last summer. We restructured Coach Day's contract for long-term stability. We're doing lots of facility master planning, from Ohio Stadium to the St. John Arena corridor, our athletic district master plan, new hockey arena, the Woody Hayes complex, lots of other smaller projects. We're in the process of remaking our game day atmosphere, so you'll start to see more things about that as we approach the fall. And then I believe in culture over strategy. We've worked a lot on people, just getting to know people, understanding what makes people tick, and how we continue to thrive. So culture over strategy. Yesterday, or earlier this week, Monday, Buckeye Sports Group. I'm sure we have lots of questions about that, but essentially what that does is that brings all the resources that we've had in NIL, and it's been dispersed, right? Collectives, a little bit of Learfield, right? Athletes can get, agreements on their own. This really brings everything under one umbrella. So the Foundation, 1870, the people involved in those groups, they want to stay involved. They want to help, and we embrace that. And so they've done a great job, but as we transition with Ohio State Sports Properties, it's really a marketing agency that can go out and arrange agreements between an athlete and a business. And I'll get into some of the house case elements here in a second. If you think about Columbus, 2.2 million people, we have 16 Fortune 1000 companies. We have 50 companies that employ over 1,000 people right here in Columbus. We have a ton of former athletes that live in our community, so we've got built-in connections. So really, really excited about the Buckeye Sports Group and the partnerships that have been created. Today we announced a center. This is not a physical space. This is kind of an umbrella description, so it's not a physical space per se, but we announced a center for sports intelligence and strategy. And it's really a centralized resource. Many people have raced out and hired maybe what people call general managers. So we wanted to take a different approach and say, how do we centralize resources for those coaches that may not have a big staff? But can we provide resources within our department? And so, although not a physical space, we think it's just a groundbreaking resource that'll have data. It'll have sports science, it'll have sports performance, it'll have a lot of the elements around the circle of care that we use for our student athletes. So we think it's an innovative approach to adapting to this new landscape. So some people are moving positions into this group, and we announced a lot of those things earlier today. So college athletics, when you guys all remember exactly what I said on January 17th, 2024, right? I know Bill does. Because Bill writes books, so he remembers these kind of things. But what I talked about was the state of college athletics. And I said, okay, now that I'm here at Ohio State and we've been working on all these things in my previous stops, what happens next? College athletics. I talked about we need a model that intersects sports and academics. So we led with academic performance. Again, go to class, play games. I talked about that. I said we need a model that looks after our individual calendars. Transfer portal windows, recruiting calendars, playing schedule calendars. We said we need to chart a new course for the financial arrangement between the athlete and the institution. We have that now, right? We said that we need to sit down with our athletes and we need to hear from them. That's still a work in progress. What that looks like, we need to continue to work on that. We need to redo NCAA governance. So that's being worked on as we speak as it relates to the house case settlement. And so we talked about a lot of these things about, look, it's time to really just take action, right? We've been in the courtroom, now we're in Congress, we need some pursuits there, but we laid out all of those things. And so while there is some clarity around the house case, there's still work to be done. There's a hearing today in the House Energy and Commerce, right? And so there's a lot of activity happening. So we still need some work at the federal level. So I'm almost done, just bear with me. So Project 36. So how do we adapt? So we started Project 36 in the fall of 2023. I believe before I got here about, okay, we know house case settlement is coming. How do we do it here at Ohio State? So there was a lot of planning that took place starting in the fall of 2023. So for us, right, and we know what the parameters are, there's $20.5 million of revenue share dollars that can now be given to the athlete. And as part of that, anytime you add a new scholarship in any sport, whether it's 1, 5, or 91 like we did, that has to count against the $20.5 million, up to $2.5. Does everyone follow that? 20.5, $2.5 million of scholarships. We added 91. So therefore, there's $18 million to distribute to our sports, right? And so the scholarship piece, I don't think, was widely publicized at the beginning, but anytime we add a scholarship, we have to count it against the cap. And so for us, we will allocate the $18 million starting in 4 sports: women's volleyball, women's basketball, men's basketball, and of course, our football program. We really try to use metrics and a formula while also balancing some Title IX approach in this as well. You know, last year, numbers create narratives, right? We know what we're talking about, right? So Patrick's smiling. He knows what I'm talking about. So look, people want to run with numbers, and this is how much this is. The key point in all of this is more opportunity for athletes than ever before, directly from the institution. And so we're not going to get into calculating how much this program gets or that program, but it's 4 sports, it's $18 million cash, and then that'll grow by 4% a year. And then it can also have a look-in period based on, you know, new revenues that come into college athletics. So that's how we set it up. Those are the 4 sports that we start with. We hope we can grow that. We hope we can expand. We'll continue to work within that. You will also see College Sports Commission set up. So that got launched on Friday night when Judge Wilkin put out her order at 9:15 p.m. How many had put their phone away like me? I had set my phone away thinking end of June, and here we are making that announcement on a Friday night. But College Sports Commission, they will oversee, this is really a unique distinction, they will oversee the rules of engagement for the House case settlement. The NCAA will oversee rules of engagement that still live with the NCAA. So that's a very clear distinction. I was fortunate or unfortunate to be on the implementation committee on the enforcement subgroup, where we mapped out what should enforcement look like. How will rulemaking apply? How will penalties apply? And so we had an inside look. We wanted practitioners in the room. The Big Ten asked me to do that, and I gladly stepped up. So you're seeing things in the House case: valid business purpose, right? Range of compensation, associated entities. That didn't come from us, right? That came from the House case settlement. So language specific to how this gets rolled out is in the settlement. It's a legally binding settlement. There's a cap management system that'll be with the College Sports Commission. There's NIL Go, which is the clearinghouse. I think I've listened to a few podcasts. I think that's a lot of questions out there about how NIL Go will work. And so you're going to hear all these terms. You're going to hear but that's in the settlement. That's in the settlement. And so never before have we had binding arbitration for student athletes. So that's part of the settlement. And then we just believe that we needed durability. So when all of this came up, what we said was we need durability. We can't be in the courtroom every year. So this House case settlement provides a 10-year window where a federal judge signed off on this agreement. And so we need to all adhere to this. We're going to follow the College Sports Commission and the guidelines that are set forward. But at the end of the day, we still need Congress. We still need to preempt state law. We still need to have a codification around student athletes and how do we categorize them. Students that play sports, not particularly employees. And then we need some thread of legal liability protection that codifies the House case, but also doesn't put us in the courtroom every time there's decisions to be made. So there's a lot. We can talk about college football playoffs. We can talk about transfer portal calendars. We can talk about NCAA governance and all the things that are happening. It's a fascinating time. There's a lot to it. So thanks for bearing with me for 18 minutes on the preamble. Now are you going to monitor this?
Sure.
Jerry? Okay.
We'll open up the floor for
Okay.
questions. We'll open up to the right. Spencer Holbrook, Letterman Row.
Yeah, Ross, the last couple weeks, folks from the SEC have been pretty vocal about what they believe the future of college football and the models of the playoffs should be. Do you think that the Big Ten and some of you guys should start speaking out more on what you guys believe is best for everything? And how do you start going about being more vocal with it?
Yeah, look, here's the decision-making authority rests with the commissioners in the room. And then they bring that to the governing board of the CFP, which is presidents that represent all 10 of the conferences. So to me, debating it in public, I don't think that does any good. I think what we need to do from our perspective is we need to take a step back. We need to keep engaging with our colleagues across. I saw a lot of the SEC ADs this week. We had those conversations. And so, yeah, could we be more, vocal about some positioning? Perhaps. But at the same time, there is so much work that has to be done. So look, we believe in what we believe in. We're willing to listen, and I think that's a position that we have to take. But playing it out in public and staking claim, what good does that do? Because one week it was 4-4, 2-2-1, had a lot of traction. That was out publicly. And then the next week it was 5-11. But have we accomplished anything yet? No. So let's play it out where it should be played out, in these conversations where the authority lies. And so, look, we're confident in the commissioners. We're confident in Commissioner Petiti. I worked 12 years with Commissioner Sankey. We'll figure this out, but I think we need to all just take a step back and then come back together at the right time to fix it, because we know we can fix it. We just have to come back together.
Far left, Dan Hope, 11 Warriors.
Ross, it's been well publicized, but you made a push to get the Ohio State-Texas game moved to Sunday night. Kind of what was that whole process like, and what are you doing to try to get more of those marquee night games going forward?
How much time do we have? Right? It's up to me? Okay. Okay. Is this a podcast? Is this a long-form podcast that we need to go through? Really started the conversation back in the fall, as we were forecasting out and knowing that we had a lot of noon games last year, just forecasting out, okay, we've got Texas, big-time game. Who knows what would happen? We didn't know what postseason would look like back in November, right? So just mapping out, okay, that's going to be a big game. And look, I think our program, our fans deserve some marquee night games. So we started having that conversation. Texas, in the contract, it goes both ways. They have the ability to approve or not if the game moves off of a Saturday. We asked them. I don't blame them. But those conversations started. We worked with Fox. They were understanding. But really, at the end of the day, there's no flexibility in the contracts. Fox bought the noon window. CBS bought the afternoon window. And NBC has the night window. And then the Big Ten Network and Peacock, layer into that. So what we need is more flexibility. Can that happen anytime soon? I don't know. But I think every program should deserve the right to have way more flexibility. We have carried the day for Big Noon. There's no question about it. If you look at the viewership, so we understand why Fox went with Big Noon. We understand why we're picked all the time. But we're hoping just more flexibility. That's what we're looking for. And so, I think Commissioner Petiti is going to work with our TV partners. We're going to continue to have those conversations, but can anything change anytime soon? Probably not, because those contracts are rigid and they're locked in for several years.
You mentioned that Ohio State has carried the day. Do you feel like you guys maybe need to throw your weight around a little more the next time those contract negotiations come up?
I think the question is, what does that mean? What does that mean when you say that? And so I think we can be firm in our positioning. I think we can show data on how we have carried the day. So we have said no to Friday night games. I mean, there's been some things that we have kind of drawn a line in the sand, and that's okay. But I think we need to be thoughtful about, okay, there's going to be a balance. We do have a TV partner with Fox. They're paying us a lot of money. They actually sub-license to CBS and NBC, right? And so what we're hoping for is that there's a little more collaboration because of that, and so we'll continue to express that.
Far left, Whitney Harding, WCMH.
Hey Ross, one of the questions around the settlement, the revenue share, does bring up Title IX. How do you work that out with a sport with so many players like football to try to even things out? And I've asked you this before, I'll ask it again, does Title IX need an update?
Again, how much time do we have? Look, we have an obligation to follow Title IX in several buckets. Proportionality of student body comparison to our roster comparison, and we're about 50-50. We're really, really close, and we're proud of the work that takes place to get that done. And then you have financial aid allocation, proportionality to your student body. So we meet those two prongs. The revenue share in the NIL world is not subject to Title IX per se, but we do have an obligation to support our female athletes just like we do our male athletes. That's the one great thing about the Buckeye Sports Group is most of the collective work has been male athlete dominated. The Buckeye Sports Group allows us to spread it out, spread out the attention. So we can promote 100 female athletes and 100 male athletes just the same. Now the market may dictate different numbers, but from a Title IX standpoint, we think we'll be in a better position to support our female athletes. The back payment, I know there was an appeal yesterday. We'll let that play out. I think they did a lot of analysis on that piece as well. But for us, we know that we used metrics for market-based revenue share allocation. We had a proportion for Title IX, and we think that's a good approach. And then with our Buckeye Sports Group, we'll be able to promote our female athletes like never before.
I have one that's like maybe step 50 while you guys are on step 10 here. International athletes, with as far as revenue share goes, because they come here with student visa,
Yeah.
that's a work visa.
Right.
How does that work out?
Yeah, we're going through that right now. I know President Baker mentioned some things yesterday in his press gathering at the NACDA convention. You know, it's complicated. We don't want to compromise our international athletes. Obviously, we'll get legal advice on what the right approach is. So it's a little bit of a moving target from that standpoint. The most important thing, protect them and their status, but also, is it viable in the market? And those things are being played out right now. Thank you.
24/7 Sports.
Well, yeah. So the 18.5 million.
18.
Okay.
20.5.
20.5.
Minus 2.5.
Okay. 18.
A lot of math.
Will you strictly be the person who says this percentage will go here, or do you have a committee of your top advisors that are helping you figure that out, or how would that look on an annual basis?
A lot of programs raced out and announced, and they really followed the House case settlement allocation, 75, 15, 10. What we did is we used metrics. So we said, okay, what does football drive? What does women's basketball drive? What does volleyball drive? And then we came up knowing we'd have 18 million. What are some metrics that can put some parameters around how to allocate it? So that was a process through a lot of data, a lot of studying that our staff put together. And then at the end of the day, okay, this is where we think football is. So yeah, I signed off on that, was a part of that discussion. And then we'll give those allocations to our coaches, and then they'll have to decide how to divide it up. The other great thing about our scholarship model is in the past, you had a equivalency model. So baseball had 11.7, and they had to divide that up. What we did in this model is we said, okay, baseball, your cash equivalent of 11.7 was this. We're going to add this to your model, and then Coach Hare will have the ability to spread that out as he sees fit. So he will almost have his own sort of scholarship cap within his budget, but he can spend that as he sees fit. And that's the great thing about our intelligence and strategy center, is that we'll be able to provide central resources to all of our coaches. But really, the sports have to decide the revenue share bucket, the scholarship bucket. They're the ones that are accountable to that, and we'll support them centrally with resources.
I can ask, they're talking about if you want to compete at the national championship level in football, you're going to need about 30 million. If you want to compete at the national championship level in basketball, you're going to need about 10 million. You said 18, so that leaves $22 million that's got to come from outside sources into your department to then give to athletes and to promise to athletes to get them here, to pay the athletes, etc. Are you convinced that $22 million of these NIL Go contracts are going to get approved? And when that gets challenged, is that going to withstand court challenge? I mean, what?
Yeah.
What's this look like?
Yeah, do we have a whiteboard in here? Look, here's the thing. It all depends on when. So what you just described is when does that money get counted? So we have been in an environment the last 4 years, and then when Collective started, that there wasn't necessarily a valid business purpose between a collective and an athlete. It was, look, we have this money, we think you're worth this, here, There wasn't a lot of obligations by the athlete. So those numbers that are being floated have been between June 30th and backwards. So there was a lot of front-loading activity that took place really since January up until June 30th. So when people are throwing out those numbers, you really need to say, okay, when are they counting that? Are they counting that from January 1st of 2025 all the way to June 30th of 2026? Then it might be at that number, because you have the cap that's established and you had the previous NIL environment. Going forward, you will have your cap. Everyone will have the same number. And I would think most of the Autonomy 4, Power 4 programs have a similar distribution model to us, especially when they added scholarships. But anything above and beyond that has to go through the clearinghouse, has to go through NIL Go, has to be approved. And it has to meet, again, valid business purpose. If it's an associated entity, it has to go through the system. And it will meet a range of compensation for a similarly situated individual. I didn't come up with that language. Deloitte didn't come up with that language. The commissioners didn't. That was in the settlement negotiated between the plaintiffs and the defendants. So is it going to be $40 million in the future? Doubtful. Could somebody have a really robust system? We think we can. What is that number? We don't know yet. But we're going to be competitive. We have Columbus. But these numbers really, you have to really ask when. When are you counting that? And that's what I think has gotten out there, is that people still think there's going to be this chase. So unless somebody's going to go outside the NIL Go system and they're going to go outside the cap, which will be enforced by the College Sports Commission, then they're going to be in violation of the lawsuit, a federal lawsuit. Arbitration will be applied to student athletes, and everyone that is going to be opting into the settlement, Autonomy 4 and non-Autonomy 4, is going to sign an agreement attesting to we are going to follow the rules. So there's a lot of durability built into this that wasn't necessarily there before. Hopefully that kind of.
It colors in the lines a little bit.
I see you're still skeptical, but I get it. And that's what we look.
I don't
That's
know what I don't know.
that's
I'm
the
not inside
world,
your
right?
walls to
Yeah,
know what your numbers are. And
that's the world that we have to get through. There is a lot of criticism. There's a lot of unknowns. That what I think is what's missing in all of this is the fact that a federal judge signed it. That's precedent across the entire country, and the fact that you have a binding arbitration process that an athlete is going through. And they had plaintiff attorneys representing hundreds of thousands of athletes. So the ability to have the legal protection and the durability in this, I don't think any of us would have agreed to the terms unless we had some durability that we're going to be able to withstand, any sort of scrutiny.
Right behind him, Danny Eldridge, Canada News Service.
Hi, so you talked a little bit about wanting some changes at the federal level with Congress. Are there any changes needed at the state level for Ohio State to be able to do what they need to do? I know you successfully lobbied to be able to directly compensate players in the first place, but do any changes need to be made there at the state level?
Yeah, we're going to stay engaged at the state level until there's federal oversight, a federal bill. I think it's important that we stay engaged. Our local leaders, our state leaders have been really proactive. We worked with Governor DeWine on an executive order before the end of the calendar year last year. Then that got put into a state bill and a state law that got signed. So we believe right now we're in good shape in terms of the structure of NIL as it relates to the House case. I do think we could look at more agent protections and more agent sort of registration, education. So we're having those conversations right now. I think the elements otherwise, I think we're in a good spot.
Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch.
Ross, the Alston payments or awards,
Alston payments, yeah.
those are subject to the cap under the lawsuit or the settlement, and because 2.5 is for scholarships, $18 million is for the direct payment. Does that mean Alston is going away?
What we did is we took our Alston money, if you will, our allocation, and folded that into scholarships. So it didn't count against the cap. It was just folded into our scholarship number.
So that'll be.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. So we added more budget to, like baseball, use baseball as an example. So part of their budget before was Alston money. We just folded that into their new scholarship allocation. So it was counted as a new scholarship. It wasn't counted as Alston payments. Alston payments in our category have faded into more scholarships, if that makes sense.
And with the follow up on the 4-year funding for in terms of the direct payments, I think football and basketball probably people expected, but what made women's volleyball?
Yeah, look, the sport's really popular. The Big Ten is a leader in women's volleyball. We want to get better. You know, Coach Jen is working on a plan to get us back on track, and so we think with the attention that our program can receive, we think the Columbus market, volleyball is a booming sport. The Cabelli Center is an amazing atmosphere. So we thought volleyball could be a sport that, you know, could drive more revenue, but also the attention that it gets within the Big Ten.
Tony Gerben, Buckeye Huddle.
Ross, do you want to share what the metrics are in terms of what each of those 4 sports are going to get of that 18 million?
The specific numbers? No. That's what I mentioned at the beginning. Numbers create narratives, right? And we just back to Steve's point, right? So no, we're not giving out. And plus, look, that's kind of a trade element, right? That we think we should be protective of. And so again, we're competitive in the marketplace, but the specific numbers, people get latched onto that. The important thing is 20.5 new scholarships, 18 million across 4 sports, and it'll grow over time.
Instead, I'll just ask, what's Ohio State's thoughts on what CFP plan they want moving forward? 4-4-2-2-1.
Look, we could be really, really selfish here and say we should go back to a 14 playoff. And I think Ohio State will be really good. We'll be well positioned, right? But for the good of the game, I think for our conference, I think expansion should happen. 14 or 16, I could kind of go either way. And then, look, I think in this world, one, I think players want to play high-level games. And then 2, content. We need more content because that will drive more revenue. That can drive more NIL opportunities for our athletes, third-party NIL. And so can we create play-in games that equate to automatic qualifiers? I think that's a really good model. And the other thing, too, there's a lot of debate about the committee, right, and what kind of metrics they have. If you have automatic qualifying spots with play-in games, then you have more content and you eliminate a lot of the committee maybe dynamics that may, get in the way. So that was our thought. We think, but again, take a step back. Let's recalibrate these conversations. Let's figure out what is the right model. But from our standpoint, look, we're going to always be in position. We're consistent in our performance, what we're doing in recruiting and Coach Day and the leadership. So, but that's our perspective is expansion, but let's get the right model that I think produces, more excitement, more content, makes the regular season matter. The fact that we're playing Texas the next 2 years, Alabama the 2 years after that, Georgia down the road. If we're going to keep playing those games, then it needs to add up in the playoff calculation. Otherwise, you won't see those games, and I think that'd be sad for college football.
Are you still in favor of keeping the Big Ten championship game going, even with the play-ins?
Look, I think it depends. I mean, it provides a tremendous amount of value, but if you're doing AQ spots with play-in games, could there be a different model? Right. So I think that's a conversation that has to continue.
Second on the right, Stefan Kreisnik, Cleveland.com.
Talking about the 2.5 million with the 91 new scholarships, is that just this year when you add the scholarships, or is that 2.5 every year?
As of now, it counts against the cap every year. There's some discussion that may go away over time, but we're not quite there yet. But right now, it counts moving forward.
I know ESPN had a report earlier this year talking to you about the transfer portal window, wanting a 10-day window in May to kind of line up with the fiscal year. Is there progress being made toward that? Do you think the football calendar could be changing anytime soon?
Yeah, one of the unique challenges about where we are right now is you have College Sports Commission governance, right? House terms, settlement, logistics around that. And then you have NCAA governance. There is a question, where should that transfer portal sit? Should it be governed by the College Sports Commission as it relates to those autonomy for conferences, or should it stay with the NCAA? So that conversation is ongoing. I'll stay on the implementation committee. And what we want to do with our group is we want to have a recommendation on a comprehensive calendar. And that's the thing that we need to really get to is we should have a calendar. Okay, what does it look like from, let's say, July 1st to June 30th? And we'll just use the sport of football, right? What does training camp look like? What does the season look like? We should have 2 bye weeks, I believe, per year, because that's better for the players, especially if we're playing more games. But some years you have 2, some years you have 1, and it's all a fixture of how the calendar falls. So I think we should have 2 bye weeks, and then where should signing day? I mean, all of our official visitors, or 95% of them, are in the month of June. If those young men and their families are ready to make a decision, can they sign now? Or could they sign at a certain date once they take their visit? So that has to be layered in. The college football playoff schedule has to be layered in. When do you transfer? If we ever say that we care about academics and we want to live by that, then I think the transfer portal window should be in the spring. And then now that you have a revenue sharing contract where you will have an MOU with an athlete, from a fiscal management standpoint, it's better to put it in the spring. So where it sits, who has authority, how it gets done, that's all being debated right now. Does it go back to the D1 Council? Does it live with the College Sports Commission and our implementation group? Does it live with the commissioners? So we have to keep pushing that. My colleagues and I in the Big Ten, we want to keep pushing that. We'll collaborate, we'll communicate, but we think we need to get that done sooner rather than later, because fall will be here soon. And all of these things are going to be on top of us, and we need to have that transfer portal window cleaned up, for sure.
Austin Ward, 97.1.
Ross, you said go to class and play the games. Those are the top priorities to getting all this fixed. Why is it that there's either philosophical resistance across colleges or maybe, I don't know, state legislative resistance to the idea of employees? It sounds like it's a solution, but it never seems like it's one that is seriously considered.
Yeah, that'll be a continued conversation. That conversation will not go away, whether that is in the halls of Congress from a federal standpoint, whether that is a local discussion. You know, there's a lot of complications with it. It sounds easy that this would be a single source and this is how you do it, but you think about the fact that they are students. You think about what is sort of the work, if you will. We know there's a lot of time on it, right? And so I think the balance of the class, the type of work, the requirements, right, that are embedded in there, and then you take in state law, right? Each state has a different set of laws governing employment, governing collective bargaining. So you layer in just a lot of complications when it's just easy to say employment. Listening to this hearing today, there was a commissioner from a conference on the East Coast, and she was talking about if employment happened in her conference, she may be down to 2 sports, 3 sports per program. So the economics of it then layer out as well. So just a lot of moving parts. You know, could we ever get to a structure where they're codified as something, right? Independent contractor, whatever, and the employment piece is kind of separate, then I think we need to continue to have those conversations. I've heard from a lot of labor attorneys over the years that it's really, really complicated. And so we need to continue to flush that out, and that conversation is not going to go away.
And when you go back to the revenue sharing cap here, for Ohio State that may have been able to go well beyond that, I guess there's a notion that this will level the playing field for college athletics. Our priority, I think most of us in here, is talking about football. It feels like this move and capping at that number would be a net negative for Ohio State football. Do you agree that it's leveled the playing field, and would that be a concern for you if you could have exceeded that for this program?
Well, look, everybody has the same number. That's again, federally mandated by a judge, right? 22%, which equals $20.5 million in the first year. Again, back to what our colleagues are doing across the country. Most programs are adding scholarships, and they're touching that 2.5. So everybody essentially is going to have 18 million. How they divide that up is up to them. again, we think we're in a really competitive spot. And then if you layer in a third-party NIL environment, back to the numbers I gave, we're in a competitive spot. So now we have to orchestrate that. We have to arrange that. We have to make sure it meets fair market value. So Ohio State football is a built-to-last championship brand. That's not going away. How we navigate it is going to be an evolution, right? How other programs may, there's a lot of studies on this, right? Basketball, NBA basketball, Supermax. They load up on 3 players, and then the rest are like way below average. How do programs do that? Do they load up on 10 players at key positions? Right, so all of this is going to really, really be a thoughtful process. I know with Coach Day, with Mark Pantoni, they are going through analytics on value per spot. Having Matt Patricia here from the NFL experience is tremendously valuable. Thoughts on, hey, this position in the NFL is valued at this level. You can apply that to college. So we will always be at the front of the game from a competitive standpoint, but others will have essentially the same resources. So then it's a matter of how do you continue to recruit, to a championship brand, and we're going to be right there every year.
Far right, Kellyanne Stitz, WSYX.
Ross, the Center for Sports Intelligence and Strategy,
Yeah.
Can you provide an example of what that group, projects that they'll be working on, and what kind of GM advice they would give to coaches?
Yeah, look, it'll vary from how do we schedule non-conference from we'll say RPI. Not every program uses RPI anymore, but who should we schedule that will help you get in postseason? Right, so it'll be things like data analytics around scheduling. It'll be things like, okay, the fact that baseball has more money. Keep using baseball. It's an easy example because of the scholarship restriction was antiquated for so long. Okay, do you want to go more out of state? And here's talent acquisition, what out of state looks like, or do you want to go more in state? Because Ohio has pretty good baseball, and really providing Justin maybe with a roadmap, and then he can make a decision. So analytics on how to spend scholarship, analytics on how to spend the revenue share, the NIL payments, and then just how to be smarter around. We have a great sport performance unit here. How do we take that and give all that resource to all of our sports? So just a lot of consistency across the board. How we do budgeting, how we do scheduling, how we do coaches' contracts. All of that can now sit really in a central center, like we talked about, that I think just gives our coaches a cutting edge, performance initiative. That's the whole goal behind it. We want all of our programs to compete at the highest level, and we were kind of scattered with maybe how we oversaw sports. And one administrator might think of it this way, and another one might think of it this way. This brings collaboration to the table.
And a quick one too about the Buckeye Sports Group is your guys' unified approach to NIL in-house. Could you provide an example of what they'll be doing? Is that handling contracts, with marketing strategies, and things like that?
Fundamentally, they'll be taking companies that are already, doing deals with Learfield, Ohio State sports properties, going out and seeking new deals and matchmaking athletes with those companies. And then, yes, they can get into contract discussions. The payor will be the company. The company will pay the athlete, but they will basically help arrange all of that. And then there's content that they'll help with. There's storytelling that they will help with. There's communication with our coaches in each sport. So it's another central source where before we had different buckets, and Learfield was doing some things, but now it's a more robust. They're adding 4 new staff members on the Learfield side. We're adding 1 more on the NIL side for us. So it's just a way more proactive, robust approach. Thank you.
Ross, just with the new world of college athletics and stuff, just wanted your thoughts on the first year of the expanded Big Ten and how you thought it went. Some of your programs in Olympic sports had to make long road trips, both basketballs, 4 or 5 days in LA. Just how did everything go?
I think from a scheduling, logistics, I think we managed it pretty well. One of the things that will help with our intelligence and strategy is, okay, what does travel on the front end look like and on the back end? So again, more just intelligence around that will be gathered centrally. I know I went on the men's basketball trip to California. We left on Friday. We played Sunday and Wednesday, came home Thursday. So we were gone 6 days. And Thursday is an all-day travel because of the time change, right? So I think we learned some things. I think overall it was good. But we learned some things on, could we play that game? Should we play Saturday, Monday, and come home Tuesday? Leave Friday, play Saturday, play Monday, come home Tuesday. Those are the kind of things that I think we really need to look at moving forward. The sports coming from west to east, I know they had some challenges. We saw a lot of coaches' comments, right, coming from those programs. So I think after the first year, probably not enough to make, radical changes, but I think after the second year, I think we're going to have more data. We're going through a process within the Big Ten to really have them hone in on scheduling and processes and timing and kind of who travels when and where. So I think overall it worked, but I do think that the wear and tear of going from west to east is an issue. And then I think how we schedule games when we go out there, there's some cleanup that I think can happen, but overall, really good. Our athletes enjoyed it. Our alumni bases in all those cities enjoyed seeing the Buckeyes playing a conference game. So there's some cool elements to it that I think will continue, but there's some things that I think logistically we can clean up.
And then just on noon kickoffs for a second, there's a bill in the Ohio legislature right now in committee that's trying to ban the noon kickoff, or especially when it's two top 10 programs. Just, have you had any correspondence on that? And just also, how much do you hear from fans and different people about, since noon kickoffs seem to be the bane of most people's existence?
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't say it. I'm not going to say it. I won't say that. I think there's a location we could probably have the hearing where a lot of people would come, but we won't do that. Look, I get the intent. Again, really complicated. We've already signed these contracts. So, look, there's communication about that bill. Again, we get the intent. We get the spirit of it. I think that's the cool thing about being in Ohio is that everybody cares, no matter what corner you're in or no matter what the issue is, people care. And so people care about that issue and they want to talk about it. So if this is a way to bring light to it, don't know where it'll go out of committee, but if this is a way to bring light to it, we're okay with that. We're okay having those conversations. So not a linear path necessarily on that bill, but we'll pay attention to it.
Folks, we got about 10 minutes. I'll try to get everyone in. Cameron Teague Robinson, The Athletic.
Ross, you talk about the alumni base and how it probably is one of the largest alumni bases in the country, just wherever it's at. How much did that play into this Buckeye Sports Group, knowing so many different, you mentioned Columbus, but there's so many different places you can tap into for that?
Yeah, look, I think that goes back to what I said earlier about there's still so much potential in all these different categories, whether it's alumni engagement, donor engagement, retail and merchandising, fan experience, sponsorship, whatever the category is, there's so much opportunity to grow. So yes, part of the analysis was how do we, again, continue to capitalize on the brand, continue to capitalize on the city that we live in. We show these numbers to recruits. Hey, this is how much population's in Columbus compared to other locales. That's a powerful story. So all of that plays in. The fact that we have a large number of former student athletes who live in Columbus, I think that's really fascinating. So we launched, we hired a full-time person for the Varsity O Association. It was a board-led group. There wasn't a full-time staff member. We want that person to go out and engage with our former athletes. So all of the touch points, we need to staff up. We need to have a plan to execute on that, but that it layers into everything, this power. And the really cool thing about it is they may not have gone to school here, but they grew up in Ohio, they moved off somewhere else, they're automatically a Buckeye fan. So I don't know how many people, countless people that I've run into in that category. Countless. So that's the part. How do we really reach those people? How do we use data to reach those people? How do we use outreach? How do we do a statewide tour? Can we get our program out? People are always driving to us. Can we take us to them? So those are all the things that we're mapping out.
You mentioned football programs, a built glass championship program. I'm curious, now that you've been able to kind of see it up close and behind the scenes, what is it about this program that stands out that really its consistency level is higher than everybody else's?
That word right there, consistency. And, that's not just on the wall. Our players can recite that. So I think the fact that there's competition, but there's love, the fact that there's the brotherhood, but yet we're going to go out on that field and we're going to represent at the highest level. There's so much pride. What I say is we don't have to take shortcuts. We definitely don't take shortcuts on the field. Shortcuts, socially, behaviorally, and then academically. So that's the standard. And so to me, it's the consistency of how Coach Day leads that I've been really, really impressed with. And now the fact that we have this behind us, right, the championship behind us, there's wind even more so in the sails, and we're going to capitalize on that.
Pat Murphy, 24/7 Sports.
Ross, you mentioned game day experience, specifically football. I know you've talked about it before, but without maybe going into details that are going to come out later, how important is that now that you've had a year seeing all that, and what do you want to get that maybe we haven't seen?
Yeah. More night games. We've already covered that. Right? Look, I just think that fans they want to modernize. They want to continue to innovate. They see these other things happening around the country. I think we saw what happened in the Tennessee game, right? And that script had to be different because it's dictated by the CFP. And so I think we learned a lot. We were already studying things before that, but we learned a lot from that. So when we play music, how we play music, how we have to do sponsor obligations, but how we do that. Can that look different? How we recognize, former athletes, award winners. We have this famous ramp, right, that the band comes down. How could we utilize the ramp during the game for recognitions, right? The victory bell is really symbolic. What can we do with that? So it's kind of taken the traditional elements and overlaying that with new ideas, whether it's some new music, whether it's different elements that just incorporate our history. Somebody asked me, one of our staff members asked me yesterday, what's been the really cool thing? And I said, really embracing the history here. There's so many powerful stories that if we weave that in, it's going to connect people more. So those are the kind of things that we're putting together. We are working on new video board, new LED ribbon boards. Can't happen for this year. Hopefully by fall of 26. So those things are all being sound system as well, a distributed sound system. There's always going to be continued improvements around the shoe, but game day atmosphere, I think, can just take a lift. And it's really about just adapting to the times. It's modernizing. It's cleaning a lot of things up. It's taking our script and kind of making some things shorter, layering, just different elements that I think I really, the plan is really, really strong. And I think our fans are going to gravitate towards it.
Adam Jardy, Columbus Dispatch.
Ross, you're going to have programs under this model that are going to be dealing with potentially significantly lower NIL budgets than what they've been accustomed to these last few years. And there's different schools that prioritize different sports to varying degrees. If you're working with a program that might be top dog somewhere else that isn't at Ohio State, how do you expect those programs to make up that ground?
Yeah, look, we got to continue to have a great culture. We've got to recruit at a high level. We've got to have a good strategy, right? And then can you have a third party? Can you have the right kind of players that are going to drive a market on the third party side that, again, has to go through all the systems? And look, this is just a one moment in time. This is a 10-year settlement where this number is going to grow. So this is the starting point. Next year, it'll be a bigger budget. If the $2.5 million comes out of the calculation, you'll have that to work with. So I think people get fixated on the moment, knowing that, look, this is a long-term approach. Our programs are not going to go anywhere. We're going to continue to invest. We have a great brand. So we have to help, and we have to be creative. I know in the basketball world, people are worried about basketball-specific programs. That's a reality that we're going to have to deal with. We're going to have to face. There's programs that have singular sports that compete at a really high level that we compete against. There's some of the Big Ten that are a Big Ten affiliate member in other sports. Could they go all in those sports? They might. And we'll have to deal with that. We'll have to understand that. So, look, we're not going to panic. No one's going to just shut things down because, oh my God, this is the year one. It's going to be a process. It's going to be an evolution. And we'll adapt.
Stephen Means, Cleveland.com.
I think most of us in here maybe just assuming that at some point the CFP is going to expand again. You mentioned 14 or 16 you're fine with. You guys also have, you got Texas the next 2 years, you got Bama, you got Georgia on the schedule. With an expanding playoff, after seeing how it works this year, does that make you want to schedule more games like that or less games like that?
TBD. I mean, sir, you really need to understand what it looks like. Or do we keep those games? If there's a different model that really doesn't fit playing those kind of games, and it's all about just being 12-0 or 11-1, then maybe we shouldn't play those games. So I think you have to put everything on the table. So I wouldn't say we're not racing out to schedule out into the future. We want to see what this looks like. Right now, those games are on the books. But, you know, the SEC has a decision to make on do they go to 9 games. We definitely think that consistency of conference games, the number of should apply. If we're going to have all these models, playing 9 games should be consistent across every conference. So that is a position that I think is real. So how these non-conference games play out, I think it's too early. But we're keeping them. We'll embrace it. We'll go play. And, you know, they have to do the same thing. They got to play us too. So I think too early to tell what the future is.
Starting with the 4, it'll be a part of revenue share. Maybe that goes up, maybe it doesn't, depending on what happens here. Why is it still realistic to expect to be able to maintain 36 varsity sports on this campus with this new model the way things are going right now?
That's a priority. That was the starting point, is we will maintain 36 sports. You have an obligation to the young people in those programs. There's a lot of historical programs that compete here. We want to maintain that. We want to grow that. How we spend our money can look different, and that's okay. We'll manage through all of that. But the obligations to those young people, to the fans who support those programs, then you have some legal things, right? You have Title IX. You got to balance all of that. And so the risk profile of dropping sports, if you look historically, is typically not good for programs that do that. So the starting point was 36, broad-based opportunities. So we're able to handle it. We can generate the right kind of revenue. We've recalibrated the expenses the right way. So to me, it's the right thing to do based on legacy, based on history, based on opportunities for those young people. So we're going to maintain that. And again, this is all an evolution. Where are we 5 years from now, 10 years from now? How do revenues continue to grow? Expenses are probably not coming down, right? So we'll have to continue to adapt, but that's really the priority. And we're gonna stick to that because that's the right thing to do.
Folks, we have 4 more people that need questions. I'm going to leave it at 1 question per person if we can. Andy Anders.
You guys thought this was a boring day, a boring subject.
This has been something you said since you arrived here too, but you said earlier that NCAA governance needs to be redone. And in your mind, what should the NCAA's role be in governance going forward in college sports?
Well, look, the House case codified, right, the logistics around revenue share, roster limits, right, third-party NIL. Those are still NCAA rules. They're just governed separately. So NCAA, academic requirements, right, playing rules, playing hours, that CARA hours, countable athletic-related activity, those kind of things, officiating, championships, obviously. Those things we believe will all remain. But, you have to really get into the decision-making structure. Division I, we all acknowledge is too big, right, from a decision-making standpoint. And so how do you restructure the decision-making, knowing that we want these fundamentals to continue? We need academic requirements. We need APR. We need measurements. Things can adapt and change, but we need that kind of structure. But really how you make decisions, that structure really needs to change. So commissioners are leading that. Charlie Baker has put committees together. The D1 Council is being remade from a voting standpoint. There's different proposals out there. It's really cleaning up a lot of those things. You're hearing talk about NCAA tournament expansion on the basketball side, both men and women. So those things will continue to remain. So there's a lot to it. And now I think now that we have this set up with College Sports Commission, and there's still work to be done, but now I think you really focus on the NCAA governance piece and cleaning those elements up.
Back right, Jeremy.
Good question.
97.1.
Ross, in the last few years, it seems like the enforcement arm of the NCAA itself has sort of become irrelevant and moot. How is the CSC more valid when it comes to enforcement, and what can they do that the NCAA couldn't?
Yeah, it's a great question. Really excited about the hire with Brian Seeley as the CEO of this new group. He now has to build out his staff, has to build out the structure. We've given him kind of a toolkit of enforcement processes, potential penalties within that. Again, all related to the cap, all related to the House case. The NCAA stuff will still be separate. The fact that there'll be a binding arbitration process, again, is unique. They'll have access to information through that process that we couldn't get, before. The fact that this will be a much more efficient, linear, direct process. No more judging of our peers. We used to sit in these committee on infractions rooms, and you'd be judged by a faculty rep and another athletic director. And so this is a single source decision-making authority, very similar to the pro model. And if you look at Brian's background, that's where he came from, obviously, but you look at his legal background, that's the kind of person that we all say that we wanted, and I think we hired the ideal person, and it's going to be just faster.
That the NCAA lacked?
Outside of the arbitration, no. But if there's things that intermix with the arbitration, then yes, they could have access. But direct subpoena power, no. That would have to come through another process. You'd have to pass a law, you'd have to have another court case. But on the arbitration with the athlete, yes, that'll be a part of it. So look, in our minds, it's a much more cleaner, linear, efficient, direct process. And frankly, the rules are not that complicated. The cap will be hard institutionally to go over. If you submit a deal through the NIL process and the athlete and maybe their agent disagrees with it, there's arbitration. It's all the other stuff that has to be enforced, right? Paying outside the cap, paying outside of NIL, not reporting a deal. The rules of engagement are actually not that complicated when you think about it. So the enforcement with that group will be really narrow in terms of what they're going to oversee, which is new. That's a new part too.
Sorry about that, Ross.
Yep.
Kevin Noon, Buckeye Huddle.
Yeah, I had a much cleaner question 30 minutes ago. I'm having to adjust it
Okay.
as time goes on, but
More content. Yep.
obviously we know that you're kind of hamstrung by the noon contract for the games there. One of the biggest complaints is, sleepy environment, fans haven't woken up yet. Obviously, we've seen some moves toward premium seating, the 1922 club, what's happening in the south end zone, moving the band to the north side. How do you find that sweet spot, though, of creating these additional revenue streams that are necessary to grease the wheel that is college athletics, and to find things? I mean, fans do look at the Tennessee game. Fans do look at Penn State, where it is. I mean, it's a different building. You can't compare building to building, but it's a much louder environment. How do you find things that are going to maybe address some of these sleepy crowd narratives?
Yeah. Look, I think technology can help, right? So we're addressing the technology piece of it. Flashing lights and things like that. If we always have noon games, then flashing lights don't work. So we need more night games. We talked about that. So I think there's some technology pieces, but again, I think it goes back to how do we weave in traditional elements but modernize music, or when we play certain music, and really have a call to action. We're by moving the band going to the north, the Block O group expands. So they'll have more in the Block O membership block. So what can we do to engage them? Can we give them something that people can, that's our symbol, right? People have towels, people have pom-poms, whatever. So working on elements like that. So it's fan engagement, it's increasing, I think, student energy in a lot of ways, and then it's kind of how we script the game. We're always going to have to do projects around the stadium, but the projects will be what has a return on investment, what provides infrastructure improvements to operate the building, and then what provides just everyday fan experience. We have to really think of those three buckets every single time, knowing that it's an aging stadium, knowing that, yes, we do need to make money. And I think there's a lot more that we can do from that standpoint. But this year, we also added 2,000 tickets that don't require a donation, and we lowered the price. So how do we continue to do those kind of things so that we can speak to all of our fans, and that when they walk in there, they're like, okay, I'm coming back. So all those things, concourse improvements, wayfinding, we have a lot of infrastructure things on our concourse, like dumpsters and things like that. How do we get those out of there to clean things up? We don't have a place to put them right now, so we have to build that first to remove them. So those are all the things that are in the works. We're doing a comprehensive master plan study on the stadium that I think will yield over time the right outcomes.
And final questions, Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
Just generally, big picture, what do you think of the House settlement? What do you like most about it? What do you think are the flaws with it? And what would you like to see out of federal legislation if that ever comes?
Yeah, look, clarity of a model that is durable, based on a federal judge stamping it, based on the athletes having more things than they've ever had before, on both sides, on the arbitration side, on the revenue side. The fact that we do have a new enforcement entity that's outside the NCAA, because there's been frustrations with all of that. So I think really the main thing is clarity. Does it solve everything? Does it solve the employment piece? No, it doesn't. Does it address Title IX and how that plays out? No, it doesn't. So it's not perfect, but it's progress that we've never had before. It's transformational progress. Congress, really, we think it's a simple approach. State law preemption, so that way there's federal oversight, some category of what the student athletes are called, employee or not, or otherwise, right? And then just some kind of legal liability protection, that we don't constantly get sued every time we make a new rule, every time there's an enforcement measure, that we can have some just sustainability around the collegiate model. That's what we hear. We hear there's interest in Congress, there's hearings that are taking place, there's drafts, but we've got to find the pathway to get the action where there's actually a bill that makes the floor and passes.
Essentially are the umpires in this thing and can say yes or no to a certain NIL deal, right? And
Yeah.
what I've seen from a lot of people is that, well, that's never going to stand up in court. Somebody's going to challenge that and say, who's to say what market value is? Market value is market value.
I think what people are missing is it already has stood up in court. It was approved. The settlement allowed for the autonomy for conferences to create rules of engagement. The rules were then created based on valid business purpose, a range of compensation, right, and associated entities. So that's what I think people are missing, is that a judge already signed off on this. And there's arbitration, which is really hard to pierce. If you really look at history and precedent, I'm not an attorney, I don't pretend to play one, but we get a lot of advice, right? It's really hard to pierce a federal court decision, and it's really hard to pierce arbitration that is binding by the court. So that's the part that people are not capturing in this whole structure, is that a judge already decided. You can make rules. The rules have been set, and now there's arbitration for the athletes. So look, is that to say that there won't be anything? No. But it will be really hard to penetrate, again, the court order, the settlement, and the arbitration process. There's no other way to talk about it other than this is what's been laid out in black and white, and we have to live by it. We have to stick to it. There has to be teeth when there is violations from College Sports Commission. And so, again, a lot of this stuff is fluid, but it's the right model that I think all of us are saying, this is clarity. Let's go. Let's put all this behind us, and now we can all move forward.
Do you have a number in mind about what the third-party revenue target
Yeah, I
would
mean,
be?
we have some things that are in the works. We have a lot of activity. Our Buckeye Sports Group has been, circulating and socializing a lot of this. So we're in the market, but now we can really be in the market. So a lot of that will pick up, but there's not necessarily a number in mind, because you want that to just grow, and you want everybody that has an interest in being a part of it. That's where using the volunteers, our donors who have been involved in our collectives, we need their expertise, we need their contacts. So it'll continue to evolve.
Okay, just one question following up, just asked
Yep.
you about. Are you concerned, or are people in the industry concerned? I get what you're saying, that the court has set a precedent and come out with this ruling, but this applies to people who've never agreed to any of this. The current student athletes have had no say in where this is at, and I would think a court would be sympathetic to their plight and say, you never agreed to this arbitration, you never agreed to any of these provisions. Wouldn't the court, is there concern that a party that never bargained for any of this is going to be held to it?
I'm gonna try to stay in my lane, because I'm not an attorney, but they did represent a large class. There was a class action that was certified by this whole process, so they did represent a large class of people. There is the ability for future athletes to opt out of it, right? So there is some protections for future athletes. Again, is it 100% foolproof? No. But again, piercing a federal court order, federal judge, all those things like I talked about. So that's what we have to move forward with. Look, in talking to our athletes, they want clarity. They want to know, okay, if I do this, okay, and I do 5 appearances, this is what I'll get. They want that clarity. So I think most of our athletes, they're embracing this opportunity because they want the clarity that just hasn't been there. Hey, sign this deal over here with this group, and then tomorrow you're going to sign this deal, and then, hey, a month from now you're going to do this. We need to bring clarity for the athletes so they know the rules of engagement, and this is what everything in this settlement provides.
Ross, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot. Wow, that's good. A lot of good stuff. Thank you.